Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musical storytellers. Presented by Spitfire Audio.
I'm Kenny Holmes.
Hey, I'm Robert Kraft.
We're back from our little break. This is Score, the podcast, presented by Spitfire Audio. Checking in with Composer Carol.
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Composer Carol, you're just a little...
You need a t-shirt that says...
Hey, guys.
You're just a little square on my computer these days. And Kenny, you too. I hope we get to hang together. I'm assuming we will.
Someday. We're still playing it safe, but we're very excited about our guest this week. I know, Robert, you spent some time with the maestro working on his huge films, of course, for Fox, Slumdog Millionaire and 127 Hours. He's a two-time Oscar-winning composer and arguably one of the highest-selling record producer musicians in history. A.R. Rahman is joining the show today. And our furthest guest ever on the show. He's joining us all the way from India.
Exactly, from Chennai, which is the home of his incredible school. He's got a foundation and a school that is bringing along a new generation of musicians, and it also just shows, in addition to being one of the biggest composers on the planet and a brilliant musician, truly brilliant, AR is a very soulful human being and an educator and an empathic
He's a global
person.
icon.
He is, and deservedly so. I've spent a little time, not enough with him, but he's just a great guy. He's just great. I'm so excited to have him.
You won't believe what he went through and how he became what he is today. So very excited to get to our conversation with AR. But first, we want to thank our sponsor, Spitfire Audio, maker of orchestral virtual instruments for film composers. Many of those composers that join us every week here on the show.
Spitfire's released 2 new editions of their best-selling BBC Symphony Orchestra, including a Discover edition. That's what I'm waiting for right now. It's a whole symphony orchestra at your fingertips for just $49. And if $49 is out of your current budget, you can complete a form on the Spitfire website and get it free in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome and unprecedented. So really cool for people who want to get started or just want to try out Spitfire or, all kinds of different sounds in there. We also want to mention Spitfire's new Composer magazine. It's videos and written interviews they've done with composers for shows like Ozark and The Handmaid's Tale. Also, they have a new one up with Justin Hurwitz from La La Land, who we had on the show last year.
Of course, and most important for our listeners, have we got a deal for you? It's 20% off your first purchase. Good on well over 50 different Spitfire libraries. So you just use the promo code SCORE2020. That's SCORE spelled out and then the numbers 2020. It's a limited time offer, so be sure to use that promo code SCORE2020 to elevate your music.
And stick around after the show today. We're going to play you a little clip of, we have a new clip today, the Spitfire Solo Strings Library. We're going to play you a little snippet of a cue they put together. They're going to show you what the package includes with those cues. So stick around after today's show for that. We have a lot to get to, of course, coming up in a bit. A.R. Rahman is joining us. I wanted to take a quick minute to tell you that I've been watching the show Tales from the Loop on Amazon Prime, which is really interesting, and it's another amazing job by the maestro Philip Glass. The score is really great, and the show is interesting. It kind of threw me for a loop, no pun intended, but the first episode starts off and you're following a group in a town, a family, and then as each episode moves on, the show stays in the town, but it's following different characters in the town. And I'm not quite sure. I'm not through it yet, but I'm not quite sure if it's all going to wrap together, but it's really interesting how it each episode has kind of a through line that pulls you into the next one and a character from the last episode. But you should check it out. The score is really great. And I feel like maybe the show isn't getting as much praise as it should, just because it's on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure. Have you seen it, Robert?
I haven't, but I actually saw the trailer before one of the many shows I'm watching on Amazon Prime and thought I have to check it out. And of course, a little shout out to Maestro Philip Glass, who it's kind of perfectly named because he may be one of the first people to give us an idea of what music that is sounding like it's looped would be like, because of his repetitive, even though it wasn't looped, his music, it's repetitive. So those systems that he would devise of repeating notes were kind of looped. So Tales from the Loop, music by Philip Glass. I think we're lucky to have another composer with us for this pre-conversation. A very interesting composer.
Yeah, we've been doing this a little bit on this season of the show, where we feature another composer. Robert and I have both been watching Homecoming, which is also on Amazon Prime.
Season 2.
Season 2. Season 1 didn't have a composer. Joining us now is the composer of Season 2 of Homecoming. He's also the composer of The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which got rave reviews. We're so happy to be joined by Emil Mosseri. Emil, thanks for coming on the show today with us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Can we give Emil some applause? I think we need a kind of,
I like that.
Well, we got the studio audience just standing by.
I got to get one of those.
Emil, we've been real interested. I have been real interested. I think before we get to Homecoming, I want to tell you that I saw The Last Black Man in San Francisco and thought two things. A, what an amazing film. Who is this filmmaker? And following that, sort of, who are these actors and who wrote this? I mean, that is an extraordinarily interesting movie. But the composer was a name I hadn't heard before. Mm. And the score was mind-blowing, and I can tell you a couple reasons that it was mind-blowing for me. But first of all, I'd just be curious real quick, how did the director of Last Black Man in San Francisco find you?
It's a good question. So yeah, Joe Talbot, the director, had found me through Plan B. Actually, well, he heard some of my music. I'd written some music for a show on HBO called Random Acts of Flyness for a guy named Terrence Nance, brilliant guy, and Joe was a fan of some of that music. He was looking for composers for his film. He talked to a few different people. And then Christina Oh, the producer of Last Black Man in San Francisco, put me in touch with Joe. And I met him and we'd hit it off, and then we just hit the ground running. I'm so glad you like the film. It's definitely a special one and close to my heart and all the people that worked on it too. It was my first film. It was Joe's first film. It was Jimmy's first film. Christina's first, film. The DP, Adam. It was all of our kind of first rodeo, and we were kind of like learning how to do it as we went. So I think it will always be the most special one.
That's fantastic. I'm curious what your background is before we get to Homecoming, which we both have been watching and loving and
cool.
Loving the sound of it. But just quickly for our listeners who don't know your background, including us, where did you grow up? What's your musical background, and how did you get into film music?
It's a good question. I grew up in Westchester, New York, about an hour north of the city. I started playing drums when I was 10, and I started playing bass, and I've been playing in bands my whole life. And I got interested in film music when I was a teenager, mainly with Danny Elfman's Edward Scissorhands. That was like the most romantic score, still one of my favorite scores. And then kind of got into Nino Rota and through The Godfather, and then found all those Fellini movies and all his great scores he did for Fellini. And then I studied film scoring in school at college in Boston at Berklee College of Music. And then you went to Berkeley as well, Carol?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Composer Carol, Berkeley.
That's right. How long were you there?
I was there from 2014 to 2017, so 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I was there for 3 years as well, from 2003 to 2006 or something.
Nice, yeah.
So you had an interest in film music. You weren't a musician who accidentally got asked to score a film. This is something you wanted to do.
It's something I wanted to do, but I hadn't. I'd studied film scoring. I studied classical composition in school. I'd left school in 2006, 2007, and played in bands for a decade or more, which I still do. I didn't leave school and start scoring films. I kind of moved away from it and came back to it a decade later, mainly through Terrence Nance. I'd worked with him on. I contributed some music to his feature film in 2013 called "An Oversimplification of Her Beauty," and then I'd written some music for some short films of his. He made a music video for my band, and then Random Acts of Flyness got picked up on HBO, and then I was one of the composers, one of four other composers as well that worked on that show for Terrence. And that happened right as I moved to Los Angeles. So I moved to LA and I had this show on HBO, and I was trying to get an agent and trying to run with that. And that's how I got connected with Joe and Last Black Man. And so it was, I kind of stepped away from it, and then it found me again 10 years later. But I've been writing music the whole time.
And so fast forwarding now, first off, were you a fan of Homecoming? Had you watched season 1 when you figured out that you might be composing or writing the score for season 2?
I hadn't watched it, but my wife was a big fan. And then she'd watched it, and I hadn't seen it yet. And then when I got the opportunity or just got the interview for the job, then I binged it in 4 days, first season, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, now I have to get this job. I mean, I wanted it before that, but after seeing the show, also just the use of music in the first season was so.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up a little bit because I remember watching season 1, and something I always do whenever I start watching something is I immediately go to IMDb and I look at who's involved, especially the composer. And there wasn't a listed composer, and I kind of just thought, oh, that's odd. But come to find out through an article that you shared about you, that the first season, which was directed by Sam Esmail, who's the Mr. Robot, the mind behind Mr. Robot, this was a mashup of scores from great composers, including like the likes of Bernard Herrmann, and it was pretty bold to do something like that just for licensing and not being able to have full control over the score. You're sort of sampling, but what did you make of that when you first watched season 1? When you were listening to that as a composer?
Well, I had known that they had done that. I'd been told that they'd done that because the first question was when I found out that Kyle, the director, was interested in talking to me about doing it, was like, it's a second season, so who's the composer in the first season? So I knew that there wasn't a composer, and I knew that they had mashed up all these classic noir scores, but I didn't know which ones, and I didn't know how they used it. And then when I saw it, it's such a big voice in this show. The music, they did an incredible job. Maggie Phillips too, and Ben is a music supervisor, and Ben and Christine and Ben Zales is a music editor. That worked on season 1 as well, and they did an amazing job of piecing that together because it felt like score, But I think there's only so much you can do in that. I mean, you forfeit some control when you don't have a composer scoring to picture and Taylor making music to picture. So I think with season 2, Kyle took over as the director, and I think he loved the way that they did it in season 1. I think he just thought that he wasn't sure of how. He's very humble when he talks about it. He says, I don't think I could have done that again. like as masterfully with the needle drops. So, and he had seen Last Black Man in San Francisco, and he was a fan of that score. So when we talked, we sort of clicked, and for me, that was such a huge appeal to doing this show too, because I mean, you always want to pick something you always want to do something that's challenging and scary and exciting. And what could be scarier than trying to do my version of a Bernard Herrmann score, or like, you know, or to try to rise to that challenge of making this classic film music that in the first season was so rich and so filled with such incredible music. So that was,
you know, in some ways, what you're articulating is what happens when a composer inherits the first cut of a movie and there's a John Williams cue over the, you know, that scene, and there's a Tommy Newman cue over that scene, and you have to not only rise to the occasion, you have to beat it, and then you have to walk into the room where everybody looks slightly downcast because it's like, well, you know, one of the best cues ever written is actually kind of working in there. And you go, wait a minute, dude.
I know it well. You know, I mean, Last Black Man had all kinds of incredible temp music in it before I met Joe. You know, it had Philip Glass and Johnny Greenwood and Nyman and a lot of incredible stuff. So yeah, it's hard. I'm trying to whenever possible, get in early, you know, in projects, so to avoid that, you know. But at the same time, you know, temp music is also it can be daunting. The blank page is also daunting. So to know a director's sensibilities and taste is like temp music can be very helpful. But with Homecoming season 2, I didn't have temp music. I started writing before they started shooting. And same thing with this other film that I finished working on this around the same time as Homecoming, called Minari, which hasn't come out yet.
Wow, tell us about that.
So that's another A24 Plan B partnership and production. But that film, Christina had brought me on board, and I'd met the director Isaac before they started shooting. And I started writing music to this just from reading the script.
Nice.
And Harry Ewan, the editor who edited Minari, his incredible editor, had essentially temped the whole film with my sketches. So the very first cut of the film that existed was 75% my sketches that I'd written for the film, and 25% actually music from Last Black Man in San Francisco, because he thought, you know, he wanted to use temp music that was my temp music, which turns out in a way is actually more of a challenge to beat somebody else's cues, to beat something that you did for something else, you know, was a challenge as well. But overall, Harry saved my life. You know, just if by temping the film with my music, then the director has that, you know, the music is baked into the batter of the film in a way. And they're editing to it too. You know, they're extending scenes so that the music can breathe more. And that was an absolute dream. I would like to do that from here on out if possible, but every project
wouldn't all composers, I think.
Yeah.
I think you've just articulated, though, for kind of future generations. We have covered in this little chat the varieties of ways that a composer can inherit a film. One is it's been temped, or the first season's been temped with the greatest composers ever. You have to beat that. Number 2, you can get a film that's just, you know, famous movie cues. Okay, you have to beat that. Number 3, you get a film with your own music temped in, which I've heard before, which, oh no, that was such a different time and a period.
Yeah, how do you do that? But yeah.
Beat that. Number 4, you get nothing and the script, and you get to write from the ground up. And I realized that there is a number 5, which I've seen, which is you have to beat songs that have been temped in. You know, they drop the needle on Gimme Shelter, which they say we can't
afford this
license
one,
this, right? Because it's too expensive. But can you beat the feeling that gives the scene to which you see composers get razor blades out to say, "Oh, Jesus."
Yeah, man. Well, they're not temping with sludge, and
right.
like they're temping, with the best stuff out there, like Give Me Shelter, whether it's the Stones or Philip Glass or whatever, like. Because, and I've talked to editors about this too. There are also a lot of times an editor is trying to sell an edit to the director too. And they're like, this piece of music is really making it work. It's really strong, and they're editing, and there's a rhythmic quality to it. So, I understand the process, and it can be helpful. I do prefer, obviously, as any composer, or most composers, I imagine, would prefer no temp to temp. But the best thing is just sitting down with a director and listening to music, getting calibrated, finding out where those overlaps are, finding out what they love and that you also love.
What was your process with Homecoming? Because you are coming off of a first season that wasn't just temped; it was actually scored with these famous old scores, and with the likes of Bernard Herrmann. But you're coming on to start with a blank page, but you kind of have to keep the vibe of the show, which, if you haven't watched Homecoming, it's unlike any show I've seen. It's really, at least lately, it's really off-putting. It purposely makes you feel uncomfortable. It's shot differently. I mean, you don't see a lot of film and TV shot with zoom lenses, and anytime those zooms are happening, it really makes you feel uncomfortable. It's very Hitchcocky. And where do you begin to write when you have to kind of base it off of season one, but also you're coming in as a new voice?
Yeah, well, I found it helpful actually to just, it's like when it's a completely blank page, it's more daunting to me. Like it was a kind of a nice combination of, like, there were no themes, there was no melodies, since there was no composer in season one. There was nothing that I needed to emulate, or there was nothing I needed to bake into so I had a complete blank page, melodically and thematically and all that. Stylistically, I had a world that I had to exist in. Season two had to feel like season one. So I got to just write music that was dark and unsettling, and that was classic, or within those confines. It was I just sort of absorbed it. Like I didn't learn or study Herrmann's work or other Michael Smaller and these other great composers that they use their music in season one. I just kind of watched the show, internalized it, and then just wrote my version of that. Like I wrote my melodies and my themes and my, like, what I would hope would be a modern version, or my take on that style. But yeah, it was also helpful because I just wrote a bunch of music in the spirit of that show. I had a whole season that I absorbed, and I could just write a whole bunch of music in the spirit of the show and send these sketches to Kyle and see what he was responding to, and send them to Nathan and Matt, the two editors on the show, and they would start placing them in scenes, and then they'd send it back to me, and then I would score the picture and
There's a lot of music in that show.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. It's more than I realized.
I was surprised by that.
Even just looking at the score that they released, combined with the needle drops, I think there's like an hour of music on what was released. How much music did you write for the show in total? Because they're only, 7 or 8 episodes at like 25 minutes?
Yeah. So there's 7 episodes, and they're about 25, give or take 25 minutes each. So when I signed on, I thought, okay, that's like, trying to equate it to a film, like how much music are they going to need? How much is it going to be? But some of the episodes are like some of the episodes are like 27 minutes long, and there's 25 minutes of music in it, like, so it's and some of the cues like are 14 minutes long, it's like, it just, I didn't know what I was signing up for. I'm not complaining because it was an absolute dream, because you want that much as a composer. That's the composer's dream. You want, I don't know. I especially coming off of Last Black Man, which has a lot of room for big music and a lot of montages, scenes without dialogue where the music can really sing. Those are the type of projects that I'm attracted to. I want the music to be big if it's appropriate. You want to pick the projects where it is appropriate. So definitely not complaining. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
This kind of, in some ways, changes my last question, which is, do you have a preference now that you've done one of each? And I'd like to ask this question in 10 years too, when you're burnt out on one of them. Doing a film where you really have 90 minutes, even Last Black Band, I think, was almost 2 hours, to develop a score kind of thematically and arranging-istically, or a TV series where it's, episode to episode. But the reason that this question may not hold here is that there's so much music in Homecoming, it's almost cinematic in some ways. But
yeah.
Did you have any feeling, was it even schedule-wise or budget-wise or subject-wise? Did you have a preference, or were they both?
They're different animals, I worked in TV with Terrence for Random Acts of Finest, but there was 4 other composers working on the show.
Right.
And it was a lot of work, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same thing. The nature of the show is different too. It's more of sort of these vignettes and sketch based, and it's not as much like one theme. Will carry throughout each episode into the next, and so on and so forth. So
right.
So with TV, I don't know. I think I prefer.
Don't say it. I'm going to work as your agent. You love them both for different reasons.
I love them both. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Robert asks you a question and then says, don't answer it.
Oh, I appreciate that.
You were about to say, and then 4 directors of one of them says, you know what? What's that other guy doing?
What did he just say about TV?
Yeah. No, I love them both, honestly. But like what you said, Robert, you hit the nail on the head that, with Homecoming, it was very cinematic. And I think that you want those jobs where it feels like a film, and I think that we're living in the golden age of TV, but I think score is sort of catching up to that. Like the golden age of TV is, because with TV, it moves so fast. You need to write so much music, and the deadlines come quick and fast and furious. And so a lot of times I think, and also music is notoriously, you have the least amount of time and least amount of resources. It's like, it's such an important piece, but it's always at the very, very end and very fast. So I think with TV for a while, I think scoring is catching up to the golden age of TV. And
I think we're hitting the golden age of TV music. I really do.
I think so too.
Hey, Emil, I know that you were getting praise from all over the place on Homecoming, but especially from the star of the show, Janelle Monáe, who is an incredible artist. I was curious because of the stay-at-home orders when this released. Have you guys had a chance to meet? Did you do any sort of thing with the crew? Because that's pretty cool praise to get from Janelle like that.
Yeah, no, that was a dream. I mean, I've been a fan of hers for over a decade. I'd met her at the Homecoming rap party when they finished shooting before the pandemic, very briefly. And she was, I had told Kyle when I had first, we had the interview with Kyle that I'd first seen Janelle perform. She was opening up for Of Montreal, and she just was electric. She was just, I'd never seen an opening act just blow the roof off a place like that. She was just she sang a song on top of a stool completely a cappella. And then she also had this punk rock energy where she was crowd surfing, and it was one of the best performances. I think she's one of the greatest living performers. So I'd been a fan of hers for a while, and then Kyle had told her that story, that I'd seen that show. So he introduced me, and she said, "Oh, I heard you saw the show." And she met me at the same time she met Christine and Maggie and Ben, the music supervisors and editors for Homecoming season 1. And so she was like, "I'm just excited to be with my music people," and like praising the work that they did on season 1 as well.
I think what's interesting is that there is a new generation of composers, and this sounds like as square as it is, but who have a foot in a lot of different worlds, film, TV, and records. I mean, Ludwig doing the Childish Gambino records.
Yeah, amazing.
And even Nick Britell on Succession's been working on records, and Joe Trapanese. So the fact that you're that's a long-winded way of saying stay near your phone, man. Janelle's going to call you and say, "Hey, on my next record, would you mind?"
That'd be a dream. No, it's very cool when you find out that people you admire or have admired for a long time are aware and ideally fans of your work. That's like something that it's very, very, very grateful for when that happens.
Well, we're certainly fans of you.
Yeah, we're fans, and
thanks so much.
I want the listeners to know that he's now holding up a new sign that says, "I like film, TV, and records equally."
Yeah.
That's why film composers are our heroes at Score the Podcast, because they rise to meet the challenge as you are doing, man. I think it's exciting that we got a chance to talk to you at this juncture.
Well, thank you.
We're looking for a film coming up called Minari.
Yeah. There's 2 films actually. There's that haven't come out yet. One of them is Lee Isaac Chung's Minari, and the other one is Miranda July's new film Kajillionaire, which I'm thrilled about. Yeah, that one will be out in September, and then Minari, it's TBD.
Super cool.
Well, be sure to check out Homecoming seasons 1 and 2 if you're not caught up. Available now on Amazon Prime, and Emil's score is on all platforms, right?
It's on all the places.
And there's a lot of music there. Put it in your playlist. Have a listen. Emil's also on all the social media. We'll share his Twitter page on our page there. But Emil, thanks so much for taking the time to stop by the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you guys.
That was great. I mean, it's lucky that we got Emil at this moment in his career, I think, Kenny, because that guy's a future draft pick. You know you're going to be hearing more from him.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see both of those films and hear what he's done with them. Man, what a jam-packed show. We're going to take a break, and then coming back, we have the maestro of Mumbai, as you like to call him.
Yeah, so true.
A.R. Rahman, 2-time Oscar-winning composer, joining us all the way from India right after the break.
Jai ho! Hey, Score fans, I'm just wondering if you have a favorite question you've been dying to ask us. You could send it to us in an email. You send it to Score the Mailbox at epicleff.com. That's EPICLEFF. Come up with a good question. Kenny or I will do our best to answer it, and if we don't know the answer, we may make one up, just to keep the program rolling. Better yet, you could even record the question yourself and attach that to an email. Include your name and your location, and you just might make an appearance on this season of Score the Podcast.
Hi, this is Rachel Portman. You're listening to Score the Podcast. And now let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast, presented by Spitfire Audio. We keep outdoing ourselves on the show. Last couple weeks, we've had guests joining us from the UK, but we're now joined by our furthest guest ever on the show as we record here. He's an Oscar-winning composer for films like Slumdog Millionaire. He also scored 127 hours, and he's also worked with Robert Kraft on those films as well. We're so excited to welcome A.R. Rahman on the show. A.R., thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
A.R., listen, what a treat. Personally, a treat just to see you, even though I'm seeing you on the other side of the globe right now. But just before we started, we were talking about how it must be late for you. You are 12 and a half hours ahead of us. So
Yes.
that means it's nighttime. Are you in Chennai?
I'm in Chennai, yes. I'm with the family quarantining.
Oh, yeah, amazing. It must be so different, but what a treat to have you on the show. It's really been a dream of mine. And frankly, what we had originally planned, of course, was that we'd have you here after you performed in Los Angeles in May. But tell us, is that tour canceled, postponed?
The tour, I think, in the interest of the safety of people, and we care for our audiences, and of course it's impossible to do a show. Even at that point, I felt like we should postpone the show to next year, this whole tour, because people come there with a lot of love and expectation and trust, and then I do extra prayer for people who come for my concerts, and like they deserve that because they come with all the love and expectations and enthusiasm for my concerts.
Can you tell our listeners what an A.R. Rahman concert experience is like? Is it film music? Is it your other music? Is it both? What can people expect if they come out next year when you come back?
So back in India, I started in 92, 91. And the way music is done here is a composer should compose the songs and the score, right? So the songs are all over the place. Like they are folk songs, Indian folk, Western discos to motivational songs or club songs and everything. So these songs, I've done probably over 160 movies now. So some of the songs have become chart busters and they become part of people's lives. And when I go for these shows, mostly these songs are performed. Less of score and most of songs and more of songs. And what we do is I find a band which we sit and work at rehearse with them to find new interpretations or new interactive call and response kind of things. So it's not the same thing which they hear, but it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. More musicality and more fun on stage, more surprises. So that's my show. But
the songs actually, I didn't really realize that. The songs originally first appear in a film. And that's how they get first known. That's the radio in some ways.
Exactly. So what we do is we release the songs. It used to be like that, at least when the age of cassettes and CDs. The songs used to come at least a month before and they'll get popular on radio. And if the songs are liked, people come for the movie like twice or thrice to experience the visual and dance and music and the mix of the songs. So they're fans of even mixes. Oh, I love that mix of the song, so I go for this.
That's really interesting because in some ways that ties way ahead to the fact that I actually had the opportunity to participate in the remix of Jai Ho. And
yes,
I always wanted to ask you, and I've never had the chance until today. I was called by Jimmy Iovine and Ron Fair at Interscope, where we had the soundtrack of Slumdog, to come to the studio and participate in the commercial single mix of Jai Ho.
Which by the way, Jai Ho is the Oscar-winning song of Slumdog Millionaire.
The huge international smash that AR wrote. And they informed me when I got there that they had decided to replace the singers that you had originally recorded with the Pussycat Dolls. And I remember thinking, you're kidding, right? I just thought they were literally, why would you do that? The record is perfect as it is. But for a lot of reasons, some of which maybe aren't for airing on this television show and this podcast, they had an investment in the Pussycat Dolls. I've never had a chance to ask you, AR, how did you feel about that? And did they ask your permission?
Well, let's take, in my mind, there are two things running up. First of all, you have this crossover soundtrack, which doesn't happen usually.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, if it's just a movie song with a very alien language for the English people, it's going to reach probably limited audience.
Mm-hmm.
And a thing like that would make it even more popular. And then through that, they will come to the original. So my mind was working that way.
Yes.
And I think I was right. I was right because I remember going to Australia the next year, and then almost everyone recognized me because I've come in. I purposely wanted to be in a very small amount in that video, just like 5 seconds or something. I said, don't put me more and put me separately. Even though Nicole was amazing to work with.
That's so interesting because I actually went to Austria probably 10 years later. I was in Vienna, and I remember walking into some kind of electronic store, and Jai-Ho with the Pussycat Dolls was on, and everybody's kind of, and I thought, boy, this is the mark of a hit, that this many years later, you're hearing it. I do remember one other thing that I discovered when we put the original tracks up on the console and we were soloing them. I didn't realize, AR, and now I fundamentally understand how incredibly great a programmer you are and how high-tech that recording was. I assumed this was going to be a room full of players and we're going to have room sound on tracks. I didn't realize that it was recorded the way it was, and it sounded like there was incredible sequencing going on. Had you approached Indian music and authentic recordings with sequencing and computers since the beginning? Yeah. Okay, let me tell you the history. My father bought the first Korg SH700 in Singapore in 1973-74. So he apparently got a free ticket to Japan. He's from South India, and he used to work in Malayalam movies. Malayalam is the next state, Kerala state, where he was an arranger, composer, a musician, and all this stuff. And he was loved. He would work in 4 or 5 places at the same time. He had a Morris Minor car, and So he passed away in 76, I think, overworking, not sleeping, not eating. He wanted to buy a house for his family. So he did all that, and he left. I was 9. And I had all this gear. I had the synthesizer. I had Yamaha double manual keyboards, Farfisa organ, all that stuff left. And my mother, being a very intelligent woman, at 26, she was widowed, and she found that everybody said, you have to sell all this stuff, put it in the bank, get the interest, and live your life. Now, your husband has passed away. She said, no, my son is going to learn this. Wow. I don't know what faith she had in me. And yeah, this happened, and then I was left with all these toys. I grew up with playing all these synthesizers and programming this stuff and getting electrocuted also sometimes as a kid. And so in 84, I was intrigued. I was playing like small sessions with my father's friends, like one of the gentlemen who recently passed away, M.K. Arjunan, and Mr. Ilayaraja. So I had bought a music computer called the CX5 Yamaha computer, intrigued by it, and it was a very, very tough one. You had to feed everything in it, the gate time, velocity, note, octave. Like probably for one note, you had to feed 10 things. And that was my first computer, And then I bought the MIDI keyboards, like Juno 106, which is a Roland, 2 of them. Beautiful.
And tried, sequencing, and then got my first major gear, which was the MC500 Roland and the S50 sampler, blah, 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 all the stuff.
Yeah.
Then my life changed. I felt like empowered, like this is the future, man. I can sample stuff. I can create my own, I can.
How are you learning to use all this stuff?
That's a good question. We didn't have there was no internet, of course. There was no, so to even see what's happening in the Western world, there was one shop around 45 minutes away by cycling, which would have a magazine called The Music Maker from England.
Oh, wow.
And I would go 4 times a month to see whether that mag has come, because it used to get delayed. It used to come 3 months, 4 months afterwards. And I'd go buy that and read it. And now I was telling my kids how easy it is for them to download a PDF or to learn something on YouTube. It was not the case before. And then figuring out, and the DX7 especially was a monster.
Yeah. It's
FM synthesis, algorithm. Okay, all that stuff. And then came a time where I worked with some directors who insisted that I was doing jingles, commercials. I had built my small studio by then, which is probably the next room, the other room. And that liberated me. I felt like this is something which I never, the sense of freedom that you can do your own compositions without being judged, and you can only just hear it. You don't have to give it to musicians who will frown their face if it's not sounding good. So I was basically an introvert, and all this gave me the sense of freedom to explore and experiment and fail and also get up and start kicking. And so this is my history. So my whole thing started with, and of course I was a big admirer of Switched on Bach, the Wendy Carlos record,
yes.
And Vangelis and John Williams, and Zimmer did the Black Knight or
Dark Knight.
Dark Knight.
No, not Dark Knight. The first very long back, a beautiful hybrid score with brasses,
Black Rain,
all sampled. Black Rain, is it? Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's
hybrid score, right?
Hybrid score. So that's one of my favorite. It just opened up, and then there was another one called the Gothic, which again I think was Thomas Dolby.
Oh wow! She blinded me with science.
Yeah, it had a strange operatic voice. And anyway, so all these things inspired me. And of course, so that led me to find my melodies through Indian classical, Western classical, folk, and at the same time trying to get the production of what it deserves in India. Because I said, like, when we listen to Western music a lot in India, we used to at least. And why don't they listen to our music? And then I was trying to find reasons why they wouldn't listen to, because it was all monophonic. And it was it was cut off at 7K because optical would never take the frequencies, right? And so when I started coming and I had a 16 track, I said, I don't care about optical. I will do 2 mixes, one for the movies and one for audio. So all that
That's
happened.
great.
Sorry for the big answer.
No, that answer is fabulous. And I wonder, did directors embrace your new approach? And did they feel that a more pop and a more radio-friendly approach to film scoring was appropriate for their films?
Good question. So when I was doing stuff, a lot of people will come and ridicule, this won't sell, you need to use, the violin, the tablas, and you need to do all that stuff. Nobody's going to listen to the stuff. And then until I met my dream mentor, Mani Ratnam, whose first film I scored, and he came in and said, he was very unsure. I don't know why he was unsure. Then later revealed that, he said, whatever you played to me sounded so good. I didn't know whether it was the sound or the melody. So I had to go and in my brain, I had to, split it up and check whether it's a melody or you're conning me with this beautiful sound. So actually it was both, right? So it was a combination of things, which was a new approach, because before, to record music, you needed a lot of musicians. Of course, I love musicians. And in my first movie, I felt like it's going to be a cult because of the director. Like he had so many followers, and whatever he did was so cool at that point. And even now, that it's going to become a cult. And I don't want people to think that now, computers have come and replaced musicians, right? So I made sure that I used brass and strings and Indian rhythms and everything, so that when that becomes a success, I was sure it will become a success. But a lot of people said, no, it's not going to happen because this sound is different. And so that difference actually kind of clicked, luckily.
Yes.
And I'm here where I should.
Do you remember in those first few sessions, did you do pre-records and then have the orchestra put on headphones and play to program tracks, or did you trigger it all live? Because that was a big moment in film scoring where the orchestras would sit down and instead of hearing silence and a click, they heard programmed drums or synths. Which did you start with?
I think from 87, 86, this whole programming drum sequences had already come into the Indian film industry, you know. We used to have some program bass lines and rhythm section, and orchestra used to be on top. So the orchestra was used to all this stuff. But I always get extra inspiration when I see the orchestra. And you won't believe this ridiculous kind of work. So some of the songs are scored, and we write the orchestrator comes in and he writes a score, and then he goes and gives it to the orchestra. But since we had 7-hour sessions here, and it is some of the composers, like more old school composers, had this amazing way of having the orchestra, making them like a live loop. So the rhythm section will be playing something, and they'll say, "Oh, go da-da-da, da-da-da, gamapa, gamapa, sariga, sariga, and sa-pa-pa-pa, gama-mama, sa-pa-pa-pa, gama-mama, sa-ni-ni-ni." So they give us notes like this in Tamil, and they would start playing that stuff. And when they're playing that stuff, the flute will be, you go like, tu-tu, tu-tu, sa-ga-ga-ri, sa-ga-ga-ri. So it's like almost like a live Ableton looping happening, you know? And so that fascinated me, and I would also do the same technique when I would have the orchestra in front of me and sit with the harmonium and try to get phrases which I'll just sing, and then one person will just start jotting down and they'll start playing that stuff. And in fact, if you watch the documentary of Bombay Dreams, you'll see some Marius, and we produced the cast album of Bombay Dreams with Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Right.
And you can see some of that circus in that.
That's interesting. It's like having a rock band where you just, you know, they call it head charts. You just, hey man, guitar player, play this. And drummer, just.
It is fun.
But you never think
it is fun, but very expensive though. It's too expensive to do that.
AR, I want to go back a little bit because first off, your story about riding a bike to get a magazine that may or may not even be there 4 times a month is pretty awesome. And so you're teaching yourself how to use these instruments and all this technology. When did you start getting into like working professionally in music? You mentioned TV jingles, but like how did you progress into film?
So I used to play when I was 13. I used to play popular film music as a one-man show with the Mini Pops rhythm machine and a Korg synthesizer. So chords on the left, melody on the right with the rhythm box. So I used to be like this. There was a program called Wonder Balloon, and I would come in this kids section on Sundays, and it was national also. It used to go national. So I was a bit popular on and off. But the real deal happened when I finished high school. One day my mother came to the school. I was going from a higher secondary, and she came. I was like, what happened? Because the second time, my mom, and the first time, of course, I had the bad news of my father's death when I was in the 4th standard. Now my mom was coming, and she's standing outside, and she said, there's somebody who's willing to take you as a music player, like a session player. And he's got a lot of recordings. I think we need this for the family. So you need to quit school.
Wow.
And so I said, are you crazy? I was thinking myself, but I respect my mom a lot. So I succumbed to that. And I went to this old gentleman called Ramesh Naidu. And he was a very extremely moody person, I would say. If it doesn't like something, he'll throw things on people's face. So people used to give me scary stories like that. But he was very kind to me. And that's when it started. I think it was 84. And 85, I started working with one of the most respected composers, Ilayaraja, who was also one of my father's friends, and he was also working with my father. For a year and a half, I was working with him, and he's still revered as one of the biggest legends in South India. And what is the question? Sorry.
Oh, just I'm curious. And you're getting to it. You're coming through this process of like being around these composers and sort of learning the business side and how everything works, right?
But didn't you write the Airtel jingle? And that where the director of Roja heard you?
That's after becoming popular, and that's in 2001, I think.
But did you get accepted into Berkeley at some point?
Yeah, let me tell you this story. So I was, we were the backing band. We had a band, all the studio musicians formed a band. I think it's around 87. And that's when we met L. Shankar, one of the amazing violin players who worked with Peter Gabriel and John McLaughlin. And so he said, why don't you guys back me up? And with that backing him up, we learned a lot of studio techniques when working with him on the album and everything. And so that led to me asking Shankar, said, I've heard about Berkeley. Do you know anybody there? I said, yeah, I'll get you the prospectus. And he gets me the prospectus and then he gives it to me and said, oh, this is my future. I told my mom, I'll build a studio for you. So you rent it out and I go to Berkeley and study and come. So when all this happens, I build this little studio on top of my here. And when I was ready to go, my first movie offer comes in and says, like, and you get this biggest director, like he's like the Spielberg of India. And he comes in and says that I'm interested with your sound and your melodies, and so let's work together. And I said, okay, I have to ditch Berkeley, take this. What? And of course, some, like Confucius say that you involve someone, then they learn better. So he was, in a way, other than music, there's so many other things you have to learn in film scoring, right? And most of the things I learned is from him, the building blocks of the foundation of how to tackle a scene and how to be innovative. I mean, I had it all, but he kind of cherry-picked things and placed it in a way and explained to me why this works better, why, and he would play me stuff like Western classical music and Carmen and everything and say like, why don't we do something like this? So it was a gift to get somebody who's like a mentor and who's paying you.
Were you talked out of doing this though? I mean, that seems like at the time going to Berkeley versus working on a movie. Do you think you were ready for that, or was anyone trying to steer you toward going to Berkeley and not making that decision?
No, I think Berkeley was not that popular. Like very few musicians would know about Berkeley at that point of time. And I wanted to learn. I was interested in jazz and all this stuff. But then something told me that, because I was in the core of the industry, belly of the beast, but my interests were all outside, African music, jazz, and American scoring, and Italian. And so I think, in a way, I felt like I wouldn't be pigeonholed into just a jazz player or, So this was more, and also, as an Indian composer, you're expected to be a Michael Jackson, John Williams, Hans Zimmer all put together. So not like they don't pigeonhole, he's a film composer, he does only this genre of music, which is not the case here. We are given the liberty, okay, if you can, do it. We're not going to judge you. It's only by the end, whether it gets popular or the impact of the movie, people judge you by that,
Of course.
So that was a blessing.
It all worked out because Berkeley gave you an honorary doctorate several years later. And and there's so many friends in Berkeley. And, of course.
It's one of the most inspiring institutions ever, right?
And we have currently, as part of our team, Carol, who not only went to Berkeley, but Carol saw you perform in Boston. Carol, didn't you see?
Yes, I did. 2015, Symphony Hall, Boston. I think I originally went because a lot of my friends were performing. My friends were in the Berkeley Indian Ensemble, and I was just blown away.
The YouTube links of that are still popular. They're getting millions of views. Amazing.
Crazy.
And the way they interpreted my music was also beautiful.
Did you come rehearse with students and teach them how to interpret the music, or did they
No, I think
do it themselves?
I think what's nice is like when my music came in, there's another important thing. When I came in, there used to be little bands which used to take film songs and perform. And they would spoil my music so badly. And they would say, oh, it's all computer music, we can't play that. So I think Berkeley was one of the first performances I saw that they'd taken everything out of respect and then enhanced it even more with musicianship. And that was lovely.
That's so nice. It's interesting that it's a beautiful way to talk about what you've given back to students, because I remember when we worked together, I think that the KM Music Conservatory was just starting.
You're right.
I remember, because you will be able to correct me on the years, but I think you said that next time I get to Chennai, of course I'd never been, I should come visit your school. And I didn't know what exactly that meant, but you explained that you had just started a school, and the school now is huge.
It is. So it started in 2008.
Yeah.
And now we have almost 300 to 400 people.
Wow.
And
is it residential? Do they come and live there, or are they local?
no, they do live, but we don't have the dormitories and all the stuff. It's just a school. There's like a college of technology, music, and tradition. And so the whole idea of that is like what I went through. I learned technology, I learned classical music, and I learned film scoring, everything. So you get a more broader perspective of musicality, or how to be in this real world, surviving as a musician rather than being left out.
I would like to apply. I would like to apply and attend.
Please come.
The reason I asked if it's residential, because I wondered if, there's like a small bedroom nearby that I could crash on. I would like to learn technology, Indian classical music, and music in Chennai. That sounds like a dream come true.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you so much.
Anytime.
Are you an instructor at the school?
I'm not. I facilitate. I sign the checks for pianos and technology.
Yes, I bet. Is there a film scoring track that you can go to in addition to all that? Do they learn how to sync music to picture and score scenes?
No, not yet. Not yet. I think right now we're also opening up a branch in Mumbai, which is going to do all that stuff.
I see. Because I was going to volunteer, of course, to come help set that up. That sounds like a good idea. Of course, we met on Slumdog Millionaire, and suddenly at Fox, there was a lot of excitement that we had a film coming in with basically the coolest director and the coolest composer in the world were working together on a movie. And
that's sweet.
We were
How did that
excited.
Happen? How did you guys connect?
So it's pretty strange, actually. I think it's destiny, like how they say in Slumdog Millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
So Danny had tried to get in touch with me through a couple of people, sent me messages, and it was the most busiest year for me. 2008, I was scoring these big movies, and we'd miss each other, and he had shot the movie by then. And one day, he just emailed me, and I said, I'm in Mumbai, I'm in this hotel. He said, I'm in the same hotel. So we meet in the lounge, and he gives me this DVD and says, it'll be a great honor if you score this. He gives it to me, and I'm exhausted because I'm doing so many movies. I'll see it a week later and call him and say, this is amazing. And this is like, 3 of my favorite movies put together, And so he says, are you scoring? I'll try. And he had, I think Danny again uses a lot of different songs from different elements put together. So I said, I want to score the whole movie. When I do a score here, I do the songs, I do the score, everything. He said, if you have the time, you can. You're welcome. And he said, and then I started sending him ideas one by one. And he would just pick that stuff. And we met in London and finished the rest of the stuff. I think the whole thing finished in 3 weeks.
Was there temp music on that DVD? Had he temped in ideas and spotted some of the scenes?
There were a lot of temps, but then the ones he took the stuff, he made a lot of adjustments, changed the places, he did a lot of changes. And the way he uses music is also very good. When it comes and it's really in your face, it's not a wallpaper, it's used as a character. And that's what I love about Danny's taste also. He's so far ahead in music, eclectic
all his movies are, the music is so important. And who knew that Slumdog would become the phenomenon that it was, that you would win 2 Oscars?
Yeah, was this the first time that your music was really introduced to like the United States? Because that movie just exploded. But I'm curious, were you known in the U.S. before that for your music?
I'll tell you another story. So I was kindly invited by Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber to write a score for Bombay Dreams, which is a musical on my name. It was called A.R. Rahman's Bombay Dreams, and in 2001 and 2, it was big. So it did 2 years in London, and then it went to Broadway. In Broadway, I think it did a year, but there were some changes made. They said, for American audience, we need something changed and all those stuff. So it didn't work the way it should have. And I remember Andrew was very upset by that. And so he was the happiest. He said, they didn't get you 10 years back, now they got you. It's great AR. And then he still fondly remembers that whole incident of how Bombay Dreams went to London and from London to America didn't do well, and how this is actually a payback for all of us.
And then on 127 Hours, an amazing movie as well, did you score it in India? Did you meet Danny in London? Where did you physically write and record that? Was it the same process as Slumdog?
So when 127 was happening, I had a tour actually. I was doing the Jai Ho tour. And I would, wherever we would, the weekends were busy, of course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the other days would be, I would just set up the computer in whichever place we were parked. And I would jam with the guitarist. And so we got the score like that. And then after that tour, I think I spent again a couple of weeks in London, near my Tufnell Park house. And he would come, take the tube and come in and, so the score was done again, same way in London, 2 weeks, and we finished the score after collecting all these pieces and ideas and putting it all together.
How did your scoring career or your just career in general change after doing these films with Danny? Was there more of an interest from Hollywood? Were you getting calls for other types of works? Because Slumdog Millionaire made a huge splash in the United States, but also worldwide. Did your career change at all from that?
It did change. And I think what happened internally for me was the power of the fame and my work actually led me to find other ways to explore musicality. Like, my problem with getting commissioned in a work was you get typecasted. Now, okay, AR comes and he does Indian work or he does orchestral work, and usually these were not challenging enough for me. And I was thinking, why don't I start writing ideas? And of course, people have to go from step one. And then it's now 10 years since I've written my first story, which the trailer is out now, called 99 Songs. It's a Hindi movie. And that's coming. So this whole change of going to film production and to probably write ideas where music can do a different role, do a different characterization rather than the same kind of things I get, do 5 songs or do a score which is Indian based. So I wanted to change that. And
is 99 songs and score by A.R. Rahman?
Yeah.
As well as written by, but I understand that you didn't direct it, but that you're starting now with Le Musk to direct.
Oh, well researched.
A very adventurous new project. Can you tell us a little about that? Because I watched the trailer, and it looks ridiculously interesting and visually compelling as well as musically.
And what a big shocker, you're at the forefront of new technology.
As you always are. I mean, though, it's funny that we can look back at the beginning of this podcast where you talked about inheriting all those keyboards and learning to program them. Now it sounds like you've moved into virtual reality and film directing. How is that coming along, and where are you on the project, and when can we see it?
So first question, did you watch it on the Oculus or did you watch it on the VR set?
I just saw it on a laptop.
He just has his Craftulous, those glasses there.
Yeah. Is it actually that trailer is viewable in VR?
Yeah, the VR trailer is different. So you can go to a Jaunt app or somewhere. It's already there, out there. I think I can send you that. And you can watch it on the Oculus. So that's 360 3D VR. And so what you watched was just the making. You didn't watch the real trailer.
Oh, okay.
But so this whole thing happened when, we were just jamming. My wife and I, we were sitting and the jamming's like, it was, I think 2015. I had, so she is a big fan of perfumes and she can spot any perfume. She can name any perfume. And she's got this incredible ability to do that stuff. And so I was thinking, you know what? We should mix perfume or we should mix smell with cinema. Though I saw that people have done that in the past in 60s and 70s. And this was before I knew that VR existed. And this talk happened and I said, why don't we create because laser projectors had come in and I was thinking, why don't we have a projection from left, right, center, and top and have the 6 cameras doing stuff and the Centrac and to build an experimental theater in Chennai. And I spoke to some of my friends in LA and they would say, yeah, it's possible. Meanwhile, one of my friends who's the CEO of Odyssey headphones, he came in and said, yeah, I should check this out. This is called the VR headset. And so I'm not going to wear that stuff and threw it off. I threw it off. And after a month again, I said, like, what is that stuff? And I bought a phone and put that in. And when I saw what it was, I said, oh my God. So that idea which I had of building a theater is not necessary because this is even more further. This is like probably 50 times more than cinema because it's so real and when it's done right. So I watched around 200 different VR clips, stereo, mono, and then came to a conclusion that what works and what doesn't work, how people, like normal filmmakers, how they do mistakes of doing certain things which makes you people dizzy. And so the script was written according to, it's a basic, very, very simple script, a murder mystery, and how to entice, how to phrase this, how to take people where they've never gone before, literally, musically and visually. And so I wrote the script with this in mind, and we did a previs with just dummies here, shot it all over in Chennai, and then cast it in Italy, and went to Rome and did this in 18 days. We finished the whole shooting with 3 camera setups, one with the Jaunt, one with 2 red cameras and smaller VR devices. Little did I realize that, the stitching would take 3 years.
Yeah, I bet.
To get the quality. Initially they said, you just upload it on the internet and it's going to come stitched, and we were not happy with the quality. So we literally took, so each second is 60 frames in that to make it more smooth.
Yeah. So
we are almost in the last 4 months of post-production and this happened.
And then do you score it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, just so our listeners know, AR's the only guest we've had who's offered to shoot himself in 6K and send us the file. So that's the kind of technology we're working with. We are going to take a quick break, but we have much more to talk about with AR. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey there, fans of Score the Podcast. I'm David W. Collins, creator and host of The Soundtrack Show for iHeartRadio. Like you, I love Score the Podcast. And The Soundtrack Show is the perfect complement if you're passionate about music for film, TV, even video games and theater. Each week, I do a deep dive into some of the greatest scores of all time, as well as some fan favorites, and talk about why the music moves us from a character and story point of view. We also learn fascinating behind-the-scenes stories and share the history and background that brought each piece of music to life. It doesn't matter if you're a musician or not. Music is a language that we all understand. And through our love of movies like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, or even classics like Casablanca or Psycho, we can gain a deeper appreciation for how composers are speaking to us through music, explaining why we have such a powerful reaction to the images on screen. The Soundtrack Show is available on Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Nathan Barr. You're listening to Score the Podcast, and now back to the show.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast, presented by Spitfire Audio. We're joined by Oscar-winning composer A.R. Rahman, and this is one of the coolest projects. This is a super band that was started called Super Heavy, and it included A.R. himself, Mick Jagger, the Damian Marley. I'm really curious how something like this comes together, because it's like the top artists of so many different genres, and not a lot of projects happen like this. A.R., what was the genesis of Super Heavy coming together?
I think for me, Dave Stewart, Mm-hmm. So Dave Stewart was a friend of Shaker Kapoor, one of my friends who directed Elizabeth the Golden Age and Bandit Queen. And we met in London, and Dave was introduced to me, and then Dave called me and said, A.R., I want to form a band. I've got Mick Jagger with dinner in front of me. Are you willing? And I was like, yes. I don't know what my role was.
I'm sure a lot of people have that dream, though. How do you just call up Mick Jagger and say, do you want to start a new band? He's got a pretty good band going. So
that happened, and so I was asking, what am I going to do? So you know what? You can play, you can sing, you can do some arrangements. And I said, fine. And what happened was, there was the floods here, and there was a Bombay shooting happened, the horrible thing which happened in 2008. And then my sound engineer passed away.
Oh no!
Who was close to me for 18 years, And I was in a void, and I was like, I want to get out of this place. It feels like doomsday for me here. First of all, this Bombay thing, and this floods here into my studio, and my engineer passing away, and I needed to get out. And exactly, Super Heavy sessions happened in Henson Studios that time. And so I took the flight. I was jet lagged. I was sitting there, and I was seeing Damian Marley and his folks, and I could smell cannabis and
yes.
And here, in 4 different corners of the studio, I had 4 different cultures. And this side was Dave Stewart with his guitar rig, huge amounts of guitars. And there was Joss Stone, and
in bare
I was
feet.
like, what am I doing here? But the most liberating thing was that one incident, that one experience with the lovely artists like Joss and Damien and Dave and Mick. I used to compose with my headphones on. I would never allow anyone to listen to what I was doing. At least 18 years, I was so conscious about everything. When that session opened up everything. And I felt like there's something new happening here. And this was before the Oscars. Just 3 months before the Oscars. Then I think 2 months before the Oscars. All this happened. No nomination, nothing was announced. And the second, I think the first 5 days we did was write. So I'd be playing the continuum or playing a groove or playing something, a chord progression. And then it went silent. And then we came back a year later and then tried to finish all the songs. And I was on the board of Paul Allen. He was kindly hosted us. And I think did a part of overdubs in the studio in the yacht.
Wow.
On the beaches of Greece and Turkey and Rome and I think Italy. So that was a pure rock star experience.
Yeah, I imagine.
Private jets and choppers going on.
What was it like working with Mick Jagger? Did you guys spend a lot of time together?
Not that much, but whatever little we spent, I learned a lot from him. I learned that age is just a number. And and use age is just a number, and the drive to do music, and even at that age, like even achieving cult status, being a perfectionist, he would just warm up for like an hour before even coming near the mic, even in the yard.
Wow.
And I was fascinated by all that stuff. I was like, oh, this is what makes them going.
Yeah.
They have a discipline. And
did he teach you any dance moves is my question.
His dance moves are the most unique, right? No. I'm one thing which I'm really bad in life is dancing. That's what my wife says. So I never do that.
Yeah, we watched the video together and he's dancing. I think you're sitting in a car at one point.
Yeah. Convenient.
But we assume that you are dancing inside the car. I love the fact that you're doing that on Paul Allen's yacht and being on jets, and how I guess people assume that that's all it is. But then you also tell us that Mick is focused. And I know that people, not unlike yourself, that achieve this huge level of notoriety, they don't get there accidentally. They get there because of incredible focus and hard work. And it's great that you learned all that. I mean, it makes me wonder when you said it made you compose differently, being in the room with your headphones off must have been sort of a new experience for writing. And I actually remember you took me to a playback of Super Heavy.
What'd you say? It was at the Jim Henson?
It was at Jim Henson Studios. It might have been called A&M. And
yes.
And Mick was there and Joss Stone was there. It was a little room. And I remember that, not unlike rock stars do, it was really loud. They played it back so loud. It's funny when you said you were coming out with chord progressions, because it makes me wonder, Damien, the feel on that song Miracle Worker is reggae, straight up reggae. And you think about reggae and raga and combining them, such a nice vibe to have it be international. That's so great. I know that you're working internationally. You're doing something you mentioned before in Dubai. You have a project in Dubai that I guess has been halted. But what is going on in Dubai?
In Dubai, Expo actually promises a lot of stuff. I've been with them for almost now 4 to 5 months, and it's probably the most exciting thing I've ever seen. And they have 200 different pavilions, different countries, and it's a culmination, a melting pot of, so many different things: knowledge, understanding, and for global consciousness. And so what we are trying to do, I'm working on a couple of projects. The first one is setting up a women's orchestra, a multicultural women's orchestra, setting up a whole new scoring studio in the campus with all the top equipment and a big scoring hall. I thought in the Middle East, we should have something where everybody can use, from the West or from the East or South, anywhere. You want an artist, though, it's very easy to fly from India or from London or from France. So it's just an Emirates flight away.
Yeah.
And interesting possible. And set up all the satellite stuff so we can record remotely.
Wow.
And so that's happening. We designed that and launched it.
Are there players? Is there an orchestra there in Dubai that understands the routines of film music? Or are you teaching them?
Most of them are trained. I think most of them can sight read. We're just auditioning. We're just about to audition when this thing happened. And we're going to resume probably in 3-4 months, hopefully, when everything settles down. It's been postponed for a year. So
yeah.
You seem really dedicated to passing your knowledge on. It's very easy for someone to be successful and to just enjoy their life and do what they do. But you seem to be really focused on pushing your knowledge and your abilities out to others. Why is that so important to you?
I think by giving you actually get. By giving knowledge or by facilitating things for other people, you get the joy which gives you reason to live. Because in this age, our soul is left behind and we're running so fast. And to catch a soul, we learn things from other people when we give, and even from the students. Sometimes I'm fascinated by the way they sing, the way they play, one of the students from our conservatory was on CBS show, Lady and Nadaswaram. He was on the Ellen show and he won $1 million.
Wow.
You could check him out. And so all that is super fascinating to see that if I had not bought that big piano and the teacher had not asked for something extraordinary like that, and this wouldn't have happened maybe, and it would have been a compromise. So by doing that stuff, by signing that check, buying that piano on this conservatory and getting that teacher from LA, Mr. Chatterjee, and by, joining all these points, you get something beautiful. And that's easy in a way, but also liberating. At some point of your life, things are easy and it's better to do that time because they may not be as easy later.
That is so soulful, though. You're absolutely right that, my first thought when I hear you say that is, well, doesn't that take away from your work? And doesn't that take time away from you doing music? Or doesn't that take time away from your creativity? But I really understand when you say that actually enhances it and it fulfills you in a way that I can only imagine improves in some way some of your perspectives and your work.
And also, you start behaving, you start believing in human beings, you start trusting them. They just are miraculous after a point of time because that trust is both ways, complementary. When you trust people, the world trusts you. And so my team is set up. My sister is the executive director of the school, and we have these beautiful teachers who come from different countries, from France, Switzerland, Armenia, Scotland, the US, and they all in Chennai here, tanning.
Yes,
and teaching.
And Los Angeles. I think you have a new student coming who, after a long career in film music, is going to start at the beginning.
Please.
I wonder, sometimes...
Pupil Kraft.
Yeah. Yes, right. Pupil Kraft with Maestro Rahman. Sometimes when certain artists get involved later in their careers after they've had great success in music and they start doing all the things you're doing, which is contributing to projects and directing and writing, the interest in being what they started, a composer, can sometimes be pushed aside a little bit and you end up doing lots of other things. I know this intimately because often other things take you away and just being the person at the piano bench seems limited. I wonder for you, do you long for the opportunity to just close the door and score another film? Or do you think that's more occasional now for you? Or is it in the past for you as these projects unfold in front of you?
When you talk about Les Masques, it just took me 18 days. I took probably 3 months of pre-production and writing the script, and it was supposed to be a 20-minute thing, which became now 70 minutes because the beauty of VR and everything. So I have a team which looks after all the stitching and everything. It was clearly edited even while scripting. So I didn't have so many rushes because it's very expensive to shoot, and so that's autopiloted. The other movie I didn't want to direct because direction would take away all the interest. Directing a 2D movie with going to multiple locations and having the whole thing mine would definitely take away from music. So I didn't want to direct that. And it was a choice because it needs undivided attention. And so that's how I'm playing my balance. Things which take my mind and I could dive into music anytime. And so there was a director, Vishwesh Krishnamurthy. He internalized the movie and he lived with it for 4 years and he did the whole thing. And again, amazing team, had an executive producer who would take care of it. And of course, all the key moments I would go and intervene. So I planned my thing very well so that it wouldn't take my music time away because music is my passion. That's my everything, and that would never happen. And also when you are in music too much, you lose perspective when you get jaded. So going away, doing something and coming back to it feels refreshing. It's like a reset button.
Love that.
And you...
Yes.
Sometimes you just need a cleanse. You need a palate cleanse and start over.
Yep. So I'm not into gambling or drinking or anything and for me, there's a gamble is directing a movie.
Your life.
Like a VR movie. Your
life is a gamble.
Absolutely.
We can't let you go without asking about your time with Michael Jackson.
Yes.
A little birdie told us that you spent some time with Michael Jackson, and we'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, I think when I said about the influences, I definitely forgot what Michael Jackson did to me, because for all of us who lived the 80s and the early 90s, definitely Jackson set the bar so high as a human being. At that time, doing so many charity concerts and things like that, and pushing the boundary for singing, production, music video, and as an artist. And so I met him. I didn't even meet. I think 99, there was a concert I was invited to perform for the African, or some kind of a concert in Munich, which unfortunately I was supposed to meet him after the concert, but he got hit by a crane or something. And he was taken to the hospital, so I missed meeting him. Even though we performed, he wanted my song to be the encore, which never happened. And it was a disaster. So that ended there. Years later, I think 10 years later, 2009, when the nominations were announced, I mean, you know, Sam Schwartz, my agent, he was like, "Hey, do you want to meet someone?" So I wanted to pull a fast one and said, "Okay, let me meet Michael Jackson." So I just wanted to test, see what my agent could do. Yeah, cool. I'll send him an email. So he had his friend Randy, and Randy sent an email, and nothing happened. Oh, this was before the nominations. Yeah, this was during the promotions. Nothing happened. Nominations happens, and I go again to to LA to promote, and that time Sam says, "You know, Michael wants to meet you." I said, my excitement went off, because I'm not going to meet Michael, because, or on one condition I'll meet him. If I win the Oscar, at that time only Oscar, not Oscars, I will meet him. Otherwise, I'm not going to meet him. I won't have the face to meet him. And so everything was arranged, won the Oscar, and they said, "Okay, you want to meet Michael Jackson now because you won the Oscar?" Yeah, of course. So I was dropped, and Michael opens the door. It was so surreal. And there was Western classical music, all the stuff playing. And he was very sweet. He was like praising the way I spoke in the Oscars and the progression of J-Ho. And so I was telling him how I grew up with this music. And he also danced and showed, like, I do everything from the heart. And it was like a stroke of lightning suddenly when he started dancing. We were almost there for like 2 hours, just talking about, and that's when he said, we should do a song together, like We Are the World, and all that stuff happened. And then I met him once more. That's when he was preparing himself. I wrote a song for him, which I thought he should, but I didn't have the guts to play it, so I didn't play it to him.
Was this for the This Is It concert, or what was he preparing for?
He was preparing for the This Is It concert, yeah. And he was upbeat, but the song I wrote was very defensive kind of song, so I didn't want to play to him at that mood. I thought the aura would change.
So did you guys ever work together on anything, after all?
We were supposed to, unfortunately.
So you had a plan in the works to do a song or like a charitable something like that with a cause behind it?
We talked about many things. I didn't even take a photograph with him. I didn't want to intimidate him because I know how shy he was. And so he introduced me to his kids and all that happened. I think it's one of the most memorable moments of my life, I would say.
Wow.
There's a full circle here too, because you had your success in India. You came to Los Angeles. You had your tremendous success here in Los Angeles. And I had, unfortunately, of course, didn't know some of the films you'd done and some of the work you'd done until Slumdog, like many Americans. And Sam Schwartz once told me, "Do you know what it's like to be with AR?" He said, "Not only is he this soulful, incredibly spiritual, incredibly modest man, but if you drive somewhere with him and he gets out of the car, it's like Michael Jackson has just arrived in some neighborhoods. People come out of stores, people get on the street, A.R. Rahman is there. He's like the Michael Jackson of India.
Is that true, A.R.? Can you go anywhere without being talked to?
I don't want to believe that, because when I'm in the studio, I want to be a nobody, and that helps. It is true, because when you do a concert, when 50,000 people come in and 70,000 people come to a concert. Recently, we had I don't even forget which one. Like, people just, because I think music does that. It's not me. The music intermingles with their soul, and it becomes part of their existence. And so that's one of the problems, because when that happens, and even if you say something bad about the song which you written, like, that could have been like that, they become so different. So how can you say that, sir? Because we lived with that song, we lived with the score. And that's so beautiful, because I tell my team, I tell them that, after we do this and we let it out, it doesn't belong to us. It has so much of tentacles. It goes to so many people's lives. And so we have to be so careful and having a lens at everything so that it's beautiful and it's perfect.
Well, we are so lucky to have you, and once again, your answer showed how modest you are. Yes, he is Michael Jackson, and yes, they do go crazy when they see him, and I can understand why, because not only are you a wonderful human, but your music has touched the world, and the world has danced to it, too. And I think the very first thing you said about bringing Indian music to a Western audience is something you've achieved. I mean, Jai Ho was a huge hit and broke through, and now you hear Jay-Z and different rappers using Indian beats and samples, and you've really accomplished something, and I'm absolutely certain that Lim Musk is going to accomplish something for VR. In fact, I think
changer.
I can see the headline now. It's going to be AR VR. That's what we're going to be looking at.
Wait a minute.
AR/VR is coming up.
You better get that trademark right now. Get the T-shirts printing.
I just loved our time together, and I love seeing you and love knowing how well you're doing and how beautiful the work is that you're contributing to the world. So thank you so much.
Please stay safe out there. Reminder to our listeners to follow us, Twitter @ScoreThePodcast, Instagram @ScoreMovie, Facebook Score a Film Music Documentary, and send those questions in. Score the mailbox at epicleff.com. Robert's waiting patiently by the mailbox for those questions.
I can't wait.
Stick around after today's show. We're going to play you a little clip from Spitfire Audio so you can elevate your music. Robert, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Kevin Doucette, who helped us out, set this up, and our great thanks and love to A.R. Rahman.
We can't wait to see your concert next year, A.R. We're going to be there here in L.A.
Sure.
Yes,
Absolutely. We'll be in the front row cheering, mobbing you. Hey, Kenny, Carol, Kevin, A.R., thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Kenny, I always want to say a shout out and a thank you to Spitfire Audio. They're such a great fit for this show. They're a wonderful sponsor, and they collaborate with people like Hans Zimmer and the Bernard Herrmann Estate to build sample libraries that elevate your music. You're about to hear a musical demo of what that sounds like.
And as an exclusive to Score listeners, that's all of you, Spitfire Audio is offering 20% off your first order with them, and it's good on over 50 of their libraries. Just go to spitfireaudio.com, and when you're checking out, use the promo code SCORE2020. Right now, we're going to play you a little clip from the Spitfire Solo Strings package. Check it out. Again, go to SpitfireAudio.com and use that promo code SCORE2020 to save 20% off your first order with Spitfire products. We will see you next week on Score the Podcast.